Hey there, I'm Mark. Life's got this funny way of throwing curveballs when you least expect it. You think you've got it all figured out, and then bam. That's where my story starts, with a discovery in the least likely of places, my wife's car. It was a Tuesday, I needed to grab some groceries, and Claire, that's my wife, her car was blocking mine. So, I figured, why not just use hers? It's funny how the smallest decisions can lead to the biggest changes. I'm driving alone, humming to some old tune on the radio, when I realized I forgot the shopping list. Trust me to forget my head if it wasn't screwed on, right? I pulled over, rummaging through the glove compartment for a pen and paper. And that's when I found it, an unopened condom packet, tucked away beneath a pile of old receipts and gum wrappers. Now, Claire and we've been married for a good 7 years. We've had our ups and downs, like any couple, but we stopped using those things after we decided to try for a kid. That was years ago, so you can imagine the cold knot that started forming in my stomach. For a moment, I just sat there, turning the packet over in my hands. It was one of those fancy brands, not the kind you'd expect to find forgotten in a car. The expiration date was next year. Fresh, new. I remember the ride home. It felt longer than usual, every traffic light mocking me with its red glare, every second stretching out like an accusation. My mind was racing with a million thoughts, but one kept pushing its way to the forefront. Was Claire cheating on me? When I got home, I did the whole normal routine. Asked her how her day was, listened to her talk about work and the new fitness class she joined. She seemed so normal, so, Claire, it was surreal. I wanted to blurt out my discovery, confront her right there, but something held me back. Fear, maybe, or maybe I just didn't want to face the possibility that my life wasn't what I thought it was. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. Claire was asleep next to me, her breathing steady and peaceful. I felt like I was lying next to a stranger. My mind kept replaying our past few months, searching for signs I might have missed. Late nights at work, those new friends she'd made at the gym, her phone buzzing at odd hours. Sleep didn't come easy that night. And when it did, it was filled with dreams of shadows and whispers, a maze of doubts and half-seen faces. I woke up feeling like I'd run a marathon, every part of me heavy with a sense of impending doom. The next few days were a blur of observation and paranoia. I noticed how she'd started taking her phone everywhere with her, even to the bathroom. How she'd quickly change the screen if I walked by. I tried to shake the feeling off, told myself I was being ridiculous. But you know what they say about gut feelings. They're rarely wrong, and mine was screaming at me that something was off. I just didn't know what to do with that information. Confronting her seemed like stepping off a cliff. Ignorance, as they say, is bliss. But is it really, when every look, every touch, feels tainted with doubt? That's where my journey began, in a haze of confusion and mistrust. Little did I know, it was only going to get more complicated from there. So there I was, playing the world's worst detective in the most messed up episode of my life. I started watching Claire like a hawk, you know? Looking for anything. Any little thing that might scream, "Hey Mark, your wife's stepping out on you." Every day became this bizarre game of observation. I'd noticed the smallest changes, a new perfume scent clinging to her when she came home, her coming back from work later than usual, phone calls where she'd quickly leave the room. None of it was a smoking gun, but boy, did it add fuel to the fire raging in my mind. I tried to act normal, but inside, I was a mess. My thoughts were constantly circling back to that damn condom packet. Sometimes, I'd catch myself just staring at Claire, trying to read her, figure out what was going on behind those eyes I thought I knew so well. Then, one evening, something happened. It was garbage day, so I was hauling out the trash, and I found this crumpled receipt from a restaurant tucked into the kitchen bin. It was for 2 dinners, 2 glasses of wine. Claire had told me she was working late that night. I remember feeling this jolt of shock, mixed with an odd sense of vindication. It was like, gotcha. I confronted her about it. Tried to keep my voice steady, but it probably came out all accusing like. "Hey, found this receipt. You didn't mention going out for dinner the other night." Her reaction? Annoyance. Pure and simple, she rolled her eyes, told me it was a lunch meeting with a client, that they'd taken the receipt for expenses but must have accidentally given her a copy. She made it sound so mundane, so plausible. I wanted to believe her. God. I wanted to just laugh it off, call myself a paranoid idiot and move on. But something in the pit of my stomach just wouldn't let me. It's like when you start suspecting something, everything becomes a clue, a piece of the puzzle. After that, things between us got tense. I couldn't shake off the feeling that she was hiding something. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized how much she'd changed recently. There were all these little things. Like, she'd started working out more, which was great, but she'd never been much into fitness before. Her wardrobe had changed to nothing drastic, but she was definitely dressing sharper, more. I don't know, attractively? And her phone, that damn phone, was always with her, always buzzing with new messages. I remember one night, lying in bed next to her, watching the soft glow of her phone screen lighting up her face. She thought I was asleep, but I was just lying there, wondering who was on the other end of those messages. And then there were the late nights. She'd always been a bit of a workaholic, but it was getting ridiculous. Always some project, some deadline that kept her at the office till all hours. I started to wonder, were they really all work-related? I felt like I was going crazy, second-guessing everything, doubting the woman I'd shared my life with for almost a decade. But I couldn't let it go. It was like this nagging voice in the back of my head, constantly whispering that something wasn't right. So, I did what any sane person would do, note the sarcasm here, I started snooping more. I'd check her browser history when she was in the shower, try to glance at her phone screen over her shoulder. I hated myself for it, felt like some creepy stalker instead of her husband. But I just had to know. One day, while she was out running errands, I even went through her closet and drawers. I told myself I was looking for more receipts, any physical proof. But deep down, I think I was just trying to find a connection to the woman I felt I was losing. Everything I found was so painfully normal. Clothes, shoes, old books, bits of jewelry. No secret love letters, no hidden burner phone. Just the everyday stuff of the woman I loved, and possibly, the woman who was betraying me. It's funny, in a twisted way. You think you know someone, think you built this life together, and then one day, you're sifting through their belongings, looking for evidence that they're lying to you. It's a special kind of hell, let me tell you. But despite all my snooping, all my paranoia, I didn't find anything concrete. Just a bunch of maybes and what-ifs. I was stuck in this limbo, torn between wanting to confront her with my suspicions and fearing what that confrontation would bring. In the end, I didn't have to make that decision. Because that's when things took a turn for the bizarre. That's when I found something that changed everything. Okay, so here's where things start getting a little, let's say, film noir. I started tailing Claire, yeah, I know how it sounds. Creepy, obsessive, choose your adjective. But the thing is, the suspicion was eating me alive. I had to know the truth, even if it meant crossing lines I never thought I'd even approach. One afternoon, I decided to follow her. She said she was meeting a friend for coffee. Something about the way she said it, that slight hesitation, set off alarm bells in my head. So, I got into my car and trailed her from a distance. She went to this quaint little cafe downtown, the kind with cozy booths and a constant hum of conversation. I sat in my car across the street, feeling like a complete stalker. I watched her walk in, and a few minutes later, this guy joined her. Tall, well-dressed, with a confidence in his stride that made my stomach churn. They sat in a booth by the window, laughing and talking. From where I sat, I could see their expressions, the easy way they leaned into each other's space. It was intimate, too intimate. My hand was gripping the steering wheel so tight, my knuckles turned white. I remember thinking, this is it, Mark. This is what you were afraid of. But a part of me still hoped I was wrong, that there was an innocent explanation for all of this. Maybe he was just an old friend, maybe. I drove home before they left the cafe, couldn't stomach watching any longer. Back home, I was a bundle of nerves. Claire came back later, humming some tune, acting like everything was normal. It took every ounce of self-control I had not to confront her right then and there. Instead, I waited for my chance to snoop on her phone. Yeah, I know, invasion of privacy and all that. But I was desperate, so, when she went to take a shower, I grabbed her phone from the bedside table. I felt like a criminal as I quickly scanned through her messages, her call history. But there was nothing, no incriminating texts, no mysterious calls. It was all so frustratingly normal. Friends, family, work stuff. I even checked her photos, but all I found were selfies, pictures of our dog, random shots of our last vacation. I sat there, her phone in my hand, feeling like the world's biggest idiot. Was I just being paranoid? Was my imagination running wild, conjuring up affairs and betrayals where there were none? I mean, what was I expecting to find? Some explicit texts, a secret second life? I put her phone back, my mind a whirlwind of doubt and confusion. Claire came back from her shower, all smiles and casual chatter. I just nodded alone, my mind miles away. That night, as I lay in bed next to her, I felt like I was next to a stranger. It's a strange feeling, lying beside someone you shared your life with, wondering if you ever really knew them at all. Every laugh, every touch, was it all just a lie? Over the next few days, I kept a close eye on Claire, looking for anything out of the ordinary. But everything seemed to go back to normal. Work, gym, the occasional outing with friends. If she was having an affair, she was damn good at covering her tracks. I started doubting myself, wondering if I was just seeing things that weren't there. But then, there were these little moments, these tiny slip-ups that kept the embers of my suspicion alive. Like the way she'd quickly end phone calls when I walked into the room, or how she'd become more protective of her phone, always making sure it was within her reach. I even tried casually asking about her day, her friends, trying to gauge her reactions. But Claire was a closed book. She'd answer my questions with a smile, never giving away anything more than surface details. I was stuck in this limbo of doubt and uncertainty. Part of me wanted to just let it go, to chalk it up to a rough patch in our marriage and move on. But another part, a louder part, kept pushing me to dig deeper, to uncover the truth, no matter how ugly it might be. So, I continued my little game of cat and mouse, watching, waiting, hoping for something, anything, that would either confirm my fears or put them to rest. But as the days turned into weeks, I started to realize something: living in a constant state of suspicion was no way to live at all. I needed answers, one way or another. And little did I know, those answers were closer than I thought. 2 days after the cafe incident, I hit a breaking point. You know that feeling when something's eating you up inside, and you just gotta let it out, consequences be damned? That was me, standing in our kitchen, watching Claire cook dinner, pretending like everything was just peachy. Finally, I blurted out, "Claire, we need to talk. Who's the guy you were with at the cafe?" Her reaction? A mix of surprise and this sort of frustrated annoyance. She turned off the stove, faced me with her arms crossed, and said, "He's just a friend, Mark. You're acting crazy." And that's how our big blow-up started. Our kitchen, which had seen many a peaceful meal, suddenly turned into a battlefield. She denied everything, said I was being paranoid, that there was nothing going on. She kept asking me to trust her, but trust is a fragile thing. Once it starts cracking, good luck trying to patch it up. I wanted to believe her. Every fiber of my being was screaming for me to just accept her explanation and move on. But there was this nagging voice in my head, a persistent little whisper that kept saying, "What if?" The argument escalated. I asked about the changes in her behavior, the late nights, the secrecy with her phone. She had an answer for everything. Work stress, needing some personal space, a desire to feel good about herself. It all sounded reasonable, but there was a part of me that just couldn't buy it completely. We went round and round, our voices getting louder, our words more cutting. It's funny, in a sad way, how quickly love can turn to anger when fear and doubt are thrown into the mix. We were no longer just husband and wife. We were opponents in an emotional tug-of-war, each trying to pull the other into our own version of reality. I accused her of lying, of cheating. She accused me of not trusting her, of being obsessed. The words stung. They hung in the air between us, heavy and toxic. I saw tears in her eyes, and damn it, my heart ached. I hated that we were doing this, that I let my suspicions drag us down this dark path. But once you open Pandora's box, you can't just shove everything back in and close the lid. The doubts, the fears, the hurt, they were all out in the open now, swirling around us like some malevolent storm. Eventually, the storm passed, as they tend to do. We were left standing in the ruins of our once peaceful evening, emotionally exhausted, each lost in our own turmoil. Claire wiped her eyes, muttered something about needing some air, and left the house. I just stood there, in the silence of our kitchen, feeling like the biggest jerk on the planet. That night, I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned, replaying the argument in my head, analyzing every word, every expression. Part of me was scared that I'd pushed her too far, that this might be the beginning of the end for us. Another part was still clinging to the hope that maybe, just maybe, I was wrong about everything. The next day, Claire was distant. We moved around each other like two strangers, polite but cautious. The air was thick with unspoken words and unresolved feelings. I wanted to reach out, to try and fix things, but I didn't know how. It felt like we were standing on either side of a chasm, with no bridge in sight. As the days passed, the tension between us grew. We were stuck in this weird limbo, neither of us knowing how to move forward. It was like we were both waiting for something to happen, something that would either mend the cracks in our relationship or break it apart completely. And then, something did happen. Something that changed the game entirely. That night, when everything changed, started off like any other in our new, tension-filled normal. Claire said she was going out to clear her head, get some space. I was left alone, sitting in a living room that suddenly felt too big, too empty. I was mindlessly flipping through channels when her phone, left on the coffee table, buzzed to life. Instinctively, I reached for it. Caller ID was just a number, no name. Curiosity got the better of me, and I answered it. "Hello?" "Claire's phone," I said, trying to sound casual. The voice on the other end was male, confident, a little too smooth for my liking. "Hey, it's me, can I talk to Claire?" I felt my heart rate spike. It was him, the guy from the cafe. My mind raced. I needed to play this cool. "Sorry, she's not here right now. Can I take a message?" I tried to keep my voice steady, disguising it slightly. There was a pause, then a cautious, "No, that's okay. I'll call back later," and he hung up, just like that, but that brief exchange was enough. It was him, the guy the first saw with Claire. I sat there, her phone in my hand, my mind reeling. This was it, the proof I'd been so desperately searching for, and yet, I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Claire came home later, finding me in the same spot, her phone still in my hand. I saw the moment she realized I'd answered it. Her face went white, her eyes wide with something that looked a lot like fear. "We need to talk, Claire," I said, my voice surprisingly calm. She just nodded, taking a seat across from me. The air was heavy, charged with a tension that felt almost tangible. I told her about the call, about the guy asking for her. I watched her closely, looking for any sign, any tell that would give her away. And then, she broke down. Tears streamed down her face, her body shaking with sobs. "It's true, Mark, I've been having an affair. I'm so sorry." The words hit me like a tidal wave, even though I'd suspected, hearing her say it out loud was a whole different kind of pain. It was real now, undeniable. I felt a range of emotions crashing over me. Anger, hurt, betrayal. But more than anything, I felt lost. This was Claire, the woman I'd shared my life with, my dreams, my bed. And she'd been lying to me, sneaking around behind my back. Why, Claire, why him, why this? The questions poured out of me, each one like a blow to the chest. She tried to explain, through her tears, about feeling neglected, about needing something more. She talked about how we'd drifted apart, how she'd felt lonely and unappreciated. It was like listening to a stranger, someone I didn't recognize. I listened, but it was hard to hear past the roar of betrayal in my ears. She said it was a mistake, that she regretted it, that she wanted to work things out. But the trust was shattered, broken into a million pieces. We talked, or rather, she talked and I listened, for what felt like hours. But the more she said, the more distant I felt. It was like standing on the shore, watching our marriage, our life together, drift away into a sea of lies and deceit. That night, I slept on the couch. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, feeling a profound sense of emptiness. I was at a crossroads, torn between the life I thought I had and the reality that was crashing down around me. The next few days were a blur. We were like two ghosts, haunting the same house, barely speaking, barely acknowledging each other. I was trapped in a cycle of anger and sadness, not sure how to break free. I thought about leaving, just packing my bags and walking away. But it wasn't that simple. There was our history, our shared memories, the love that, despite everything, still lingered somewhere in the depths of my heart. But could I ever trust her again? Could we ever go back to how things were? The answer seemed to be a resounding no, echoing in the silence between us. And then, just when I thought things couldn't get any more complicated, life threw another curveball my way. The days that followed Claire's confession felt like walking through a surreal, feverish nightmare. Words like divorce and separation, once unthinkable, became part of our daily vocabulary. We were two people caught in a whirlwind of hurt, anger, and disappointment, trying to make sense of a life that had suddenly turned upside down. Negotiations about who'd get what were petty and painful. We'd sit across the table, discussing assets and memories like they were just items on a checklist. Our home, once filled with laughter and love, had become a battleground of bitterness and regret. Claire lost a lot in the fallout. Her marriage, for starters. Then there was her reputation. Once word got out about the affair, friends began to choose sides. It was ugly and spiteful, the kind of drama you'd expect from a bad TV show, not real life. And the guy, her lover from the cafe? Turned out he was married, with kids. A whole other life Claire either didn't know about or chose to ignore. When his wife found out, that little fling crumbled like a house of cards. He wasn't about to leave his family, and Claire was left with nothing but broken promises and a shattered heart. As for me, I was left to pick up the pieces of a life I hardly recognized anymore. I moved out, found a small apartment that felt more like a temporary shelter than a home. The walls were bare, the rooms echoed with the kind of silence that only comes from loss. In the quiet of my new place, I'd often find myself sifting through memories, trying to figure out where things went wrong. Was there a moment, a sign I missed? Could I have done something different, been a better husband, a better friend? I knew deep down that these were pointless questions. What happened, happened, Claire made her choices, and now we were both living with the consequences. But knowing that didn't make the nights any less lonely or the mornings any less daunting. I had been right about my suspicions, but the victory was hollow. There was no satisfaction in having uncovered the truth, only a profound sense of loss. I had lost my wife, my partner, my best friend. In trying to hold on to the truth, I had let go of a part of myself. The divorce was finalized with a cold, bureaucratic efficiency. We signed papers in a sterile office, our once vibrant relationship reduced to a few signatures and legal terms. Claire and I barely spoke. What was there to say? Goodbye, sorry, none of it seemed enough. Life moved on, as it always does. I immersed myself in work, in hobbies, in anything that could fill the void. Friends tried to be supportive, setting me up on blind dates, inviting me to social gatherings. But I was a ghost among the living, going through the motions without really being present. Claire reached out a few times, emails mostly, expressing remorse, a desire to talk. But I couldn't bring myself to respond. The wound was still too fresh, the betrayal too raw. Maybe one day we could find a way to be in each other's lives, but that day was not today. As months turned into a year, I started to feel like I was waking up from a long, troubled sleep. The pain was still there, a dull ache in the background, but it was no longer the all-consuming force it once was. I began to realize that life, for all its unpredictability and heartache, still had a lot to offer. I discovered new passions, rekindled old friendships, and started to appreciate the simple, everyday moments that I had taken for granted. Looking back, I can't say I regret the path my life has taken. Sure, there are things I wish had gone differently, words I wish I could take back, moments I wish I could relive. But every experience, good or bad, shapes us into who we are. I don't know what the future holds, and that's okay. I've learned that it's not the certainty of the path